are bright and shiny in my mind. You got me loving, hating, crazy indecision in my mind.
Welcome to the Fall Podcast, where the focus is on deer hunting, tips, tricks, tactics, and stories from across the Midwest. And now, here is your host, Aaron Blicey.
Welcome to the Fall Podcast. I am your host, Aaron Blicey, and this is episode number 69. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
I think so. 69. The lucky number 69. Here we go. Anyway, today we've got returning guest Matt Zahl on, and I'm excited about this one, man. This was a fun conversation, one of the best ones one of the more fun ones in my opinion that we've had, and I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, I did too. I think my favorite part of the conversation was kind of how we just all agreed on, I guess we could say we agreed on it, but we recognize the evolution within ourselves as hunters and like how we apply what we've learned to different places, and in this case just more of that public land success in your backyard at that.
Right, yeah. We talk about Michigan public land, and he's a public land animal here in Michigan when it comes to pressured land and hunting public for whitetails. And I mean, you hit the nail on the head. The evolution of just us BSing there for a little while, we kind of, I think we knew it, but we figured out what we kind of have grown up as, hunters, and what we've done and how it's changed. I mean, we talk about how, when we were back in early teens and how we hunted to how we hunt now, and how that's evolved and why it's evolved, really. And not only that, but we get into a couple stories about a couple deer that Matt's taken on Michigan public land. Have been some really good deer, and,
yep.
And that's a cool story too, because it happened in the same stand 2 years in a row.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, so I'm excited for everybody to hear this one, but just a brief, to brief everybody on what's going on. You said you're shooting your bow right now, and today I started my poor man's plot. So how's the bow shooting going?
Oh, it's good. I'm still hitting the target anyway. I'm a little out of practice. It's pretty apparent, but that's what this time of the year is for. I've got 5 weeks until the mule deer hunt in Utah, so I'm just trying to get dialed back in. Tell you what, though, Brian, I mentioned a while ago that Brian sent me that color swatch of strings, and I don't know if it's hurt me or helped me, because I just cannot make a damn decision on what color string I want to get. I've sat here for hours, like twisting all these colors together and trying to figure out, what's going to look good. It's like, well, if I do that, I gotta change the color of the dampeners in my risers, and I gotta get a different stabilizer. It's like, I'm just anal about that. Like, I want it all to match and look good, and it's not obviously anything crucial, but I'm like, well, do I want to refletch my arrows, or do I want to, buy new silencers and dampeners for the bow? It's like, I don't know.
Exactly.
I'm just second guessing myself to death. Well, when I ordered one for the bow, like months ago, I got a flow yellow and a kiwi green, and the green was just a little duller than I was hoping it would be, and I don't know, I kind of wanted something between flow green and like that. I don't know. This stuff looks like a overcooked green bean. It's not really bright. And it just looks, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not what I thought it was going to look like, and it's just my personal preference. But right now I'm leaning towards like the flow yellow, and there's a I don't know the name of the color off the top of my head. It's like a metallic silver. It actually looks pretty good, and because the riser on my bow is that stone gray. It's a Matthews, so It's got that stone gray color. So I thought maybe that would kind of look cool to match the string to the riser, and then just let that single color kind of stand out, twisted within. I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing.
Well, don't let that decision haunt you and not let you get any sleep.
Right. I just got to make a decision and do it. That's all it comes down to. There's just too many options.
Way too many options. Yeah, I agree.
But
just go with one and do it. Just go like, flow pink and, and like a purple or something.
Exactly, yeah. just totally against the grain.
Yep.
Hey, that's what Fred Eichler does. He always says there's nothing pink in the woods. You're never gonna, if you lose your arrow, you know it's gone, because ain't nothing pink out there. You're gonna mistake anything for it.
That is a good point, though. Yeah, but I just have an internal battle with myself. Like, I just don't like the color pink.
Yeah.
I shot mine last night a little bit. It was a beautiful night here, and got it out a little bit, and I shot up to 40 yards, and I'm packing them in there pretty good, baseball size, and shot feels
nice.
Real good, and I'm just working on hand and form, like grip right now, and just surprise, release. So that's what I'm working on right now, and fine-tuning that. I've been blind bailing a little bit down in my basement, just getting close to the target, closing my eyes, and just letting the bow go off. So that's been helping out a lot. And I went back to a 3-finger thumb button this year. I shot it in the past, and last year during hunting season, I kind of panicked and was like, I went back to what was comfortable for me and did my wrist release. And then I'm like, you know what? I need to just go all in on this, because I was having accuracy issues up to longer distances, and I'm committed to this. I shot the Total Archery Challenge with it, shot really well, and I mean, this is what I'm going with. So I need to keep getting those shots in, and like I said, at 2 feet blind bailing, that helps a lot, and I can do it at home here in the basement at night and just go down and shoot 30, 40, arrows. So it's been a weird transition, but a good one.
Yeah, I can see how I did that a few years ago, and it cost me a deer. I was trying to force myself to be more accurate, do something that's a little more unnatural. I did this. I went off of a wrist strap into that 4-finger, and it was actually a True Fire that you gave me years ago. It was a 4-finger with the thumb button, and I had it clipped onto my D-loop on my string, and this buck walks in under me in Illinois, and I reached over to grab it, and my forearm hit the trigger, and the release fell to the ground as this 140-inch 8-point walked to 22 yards. So
literally, it was all my fault.
Probably.
You didn't even tell me that. This is the first I'm hearing of this.
Oh, yeah, man. That happened 5 years ago. Before she was my wife, Allie got me the hunt in Illinois for my 30th birthday. So, I decided to try to hunt with that release. And I don't want to say it cost me a deer. I could have missed the other way, with a wrist strap, but just my horror story.
Yep.
But,
it's like I said, it's a weird transition. It's a different one, and that's why I'm just trying to get ahead of the game right now and just be more as comfortable with it as I can.
Yep. Yeah, it takes a lot, that's for sure. I went back to the wrist strap after that. I keep it in my pack as a spare, just in case the wrist strap blows up or something happens. I got an extra one, but I'm not sure I'll ever rely on that again, or that style of a release anyway. Spooked me. It just spooked me.
Yeah. Well, I had an interesting little encounter today, and I went and started doing the poor man's plot that I'm planning on doing. And there's it's the piece of ground that I'm doing it on. It's 25 yards by 15 yards, and it's on the edge of a couple ag fields, and it's hard. I can't really get a tractor in there right now. So I decided to take the weed whip back there, and it's never been a plot before. So went back there to weed whip. Well, all these, this tall grass was like belly button to, neck height, and I'm weed whipping, and I knew it was going to take me a little while. And as I get down to like the lower layer, I realized that I'm weed whipping a patch of poison ivy. And I'm super susceptible to poison ivy. Like, if I look at it, I get rashes.
Man.
That's just how it's always been. Poison ivy and poison oak. So like when I hang stands, like in the dead of the summer, if that's when I'm doing it, I always wear sleeves, and it sucks, but I got to do it. And so I didn't know that, and by the time that I had realized it, I mean, I was almost done with this plot. So what I did is I just kind of wrapped everything up and went back to the house real quick and got in the shower, took everything off, basically, just left all my clothes outside in the garage and got in the
burn
shower and yeah, no kidding. But something I did read, I get poison ivy and poison oak every year, and a couple years ago it started getting really bad, and I kind of was reading up on how to do, how to get rid of it, and this guy literally said take Dawn dish soap and you got to scrub within a certain amount of time of you thinking you've been, had the oil on you. Scrub and scrub and scrub and scrub hard, like scrubbing your skin off. So I got right in the shower, took the Dawn dish soap, and I just scrubbed till my skin was raw, basically. Ugh. So now I'm sitting down in the basement here, we're recording this, and I'm just hoping that I do not get it. Because I had pants on, but my arms were all, they were not covered. And then I had a hat on, but, my face and neck, and when you weed whip, it's like grass goes everywhere. Yeah. So we'll see, man. Next couple of days.
Yeah, you might be in for it. I hope not, but it sounds like you might be having a bad week.
Yeah, it might be, and that might be something where I just got to go to the ER, not the ER, but the Ready Care or whatever, and just get a steroid shot.
Just a steroid shot, yeah.
Yeah.
No, the dish soap makes sense. It's like, degreaser. Takes the oil off.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Well, we'll see. I'm sure I'll get it somewhere on me. I mean, it happens every year. And it's like you stay out of the woods and it still happens. So I'm like, I just think every year it comes around and I get a little bit of it. So
yeah, I've been pretty lucky. I think I'm pretty tolerant of it. I can't ever say that I've had an instance where I know I was exposed to poison ivy and broke out in the rashes and had to deal with all that. I don't think I've ever had it.
I'm glad you never had it, and hopefully you never do get it because it's a pain in the ass. It sucks.
Yeah.
Well, let's wrap this intro up and let's get over this intro with Matt. And I can't wait for everybody to hear this because it was pretty cool just to BS about this, and we kind of get off tangent, but it's all good conversation, and I think somebody will take something from it. So let's kick it over to that interview, and hope everybody enjoys it. All right, on the phone with us today is returning guest Matt Zahl. Matt, what's going on, man?
How's it going, Aaron?
Good. It's finally got you back on. We've been trying to hook up here, do this again, and we had you on, I think it was episode 54 or something like that, and we did, all kind of small property setups, over where you live in the western side of Michigan, and I think we'd switch gears here and hit the public scene because you're a pretty avid public hunter as well.
Right, yeah, that's pretty much how I started hunting, and, I would stay up until just recently when, having the lease, that probably was 95% of what I did. Not just for whitetails, but obviously for everything else as well, too. So,
yeah, and that's one thing you and I were kind of talking through text the other day, and about how you have a lease, but then you hunt public, and I want to get to that eventually because you and I kind of have the same. After picking your brain, we kind of have the same thought about it, and I want to see, elaborate a little more on what you think and kind of get into the weeds about that. But first, I want to start by just asking, what is going on right now? I mean, what kind of deer projects are you doing right now? Cameras getting out, or food plots, or what do you got going on?
Yeah, it's been busy the last, I'd say, month or so. Just around the house, I kind of let the big, I would say, tree removal from the select cutting last spring, summer. I got most of that taken care of and done before foliage really started to shoot up. I have an established clover chicory, small little kill plot that I've I mowed it one time already, and I think I'm going to have to mow it again probably by the end of this little heat spell that we're going to have coming up mid next week, because it's starting to come to flower again pretty good. So I know a lot of other guys I've seen, their clover and chicory plots have just been unreal so far. Kind of a record number of mowings for so early in the season just because of all the rain that we've had. And the other two big plot systems that I have at my house, I let those go with the winter wheat, winter rye that I overseeded in last year, and I let those stay nice and tall for the fawns. And I'll probably get those mowed here in the next couple weeks and see what the undergrowth looks like underneath there, and then prep those and get those ready for like a late July, early August fall planting. As far as food plots goes, I started rolling cameras out at my house probably 2 or 3 weeks ago. Haven't checked anything yet. Seen lots of tracks, a decent amount of little fawn prints, so that's always a good sign. And that's been occupying at least my evening times when I get home from work. On the weekends, the last few weekends, I've been up at the lease, pretty much doing the same thing, getting plots ready for fall plantings. A lot of brush hogging. I think I was up on Sunday with walk behind DR brush hog, and I think I was brush hogging for like 6 hours straight. It was brutal in that 90 degrees, but I tell you, it looks beautiful when it's all done.
That's good. I just got a plot over on my family farm brush hogged, and I was going to do a spring plot, and then time got, against me, and now it's like I'm in limbo. I'm like, should I go spray it and put it in the ground, or should I wait another month? Or I'm like in limbo about it. I've got another one I want to do. It's a new plot I need to get established, and that's going to be more of like a poor man's food plot. And Justin's kind of turned me on to that, like just talking about a lot of guys he works with, and Bill Winky and stuff like that, like doing the poor man's plot. This is going to be like all hand tools and doing it with a weed whip, and then getting in there with a hand sprayer. And then I've got a little garden tractor basically on steroids, a little international diesel with a 3-foot tiller on it that I could get in there. Because my big thing is there's not going to be any food once the wheat comes off and the fields get planted, or not, they're not going to get planted till next year. So I'm trying to have at least a little bit of food there for late season. And speaking of the clover though, I did some frost seeding, and I'm telling you, man, it is the luscious clover I've ever had, and it is knee high right now. And I need to get in there and cut it. But the thing is it's on my 1 acre farm, and I don't want to go back there. I just want to leave it be. So. Right.
Yeah. I know what you mean. Time gets away from it, and you try and think about, oh man, what do I got to do still? And then you look, and your list is like 2 pages long on everything, and how am I going to get all this stuff done? And the dilemma you talked about earlier, do I try and get a late spring plot in here real quick, or do I wait another month? I think that's a dilemma that I experience, I think, yearly, just when I think I'm going to have it all figured out and have it, I'm not going to do that next year. I'm going to make sure I do this. And I'm in the same predicament as I am the year before or now this year. And it's just like,
right.
Probably going to end up waiting until the fall, just because, all things can't line up the way you want them to. But,
well, I mean, I know we've got a lot of rain, but I think, Justin, you've got a lot more rain than we have so far this year.
Yeah, it's. I think Iowa's been flooded more than it's seen sunshine. We just had another storm come through today, and I don't know. Somebody asked me if I had plans for the 4th of July, and I looked at the calendar, the weather, and it was thunderstorms for 6 days straight as of yesterday.
You're going to be working.
So, yeah. But I don't have food plots, so I got to mow the yard every 3 days.
Your cameras would be underwater right now if you had them out.
Yeah, no kidding. But I need new mower blades just from all the mowing in my yard.
Oh my gosh, man. In my backyard, I've got 2 acres of a lawn, and like the back quarter of the lawn is the people that owned it before us had horses, and it was like fenced off, so it's like lower than my yard. It's got like a drop off a little bit. Man, I'll tell you what, that thing floods like crazy. This year, I've only been able to mow it one time. That's it. Like, it's like a little marsh. I got ducks flying into my backyard, and my daughter loves it. She just ducks, and there's like a family of ducks, turkeys, the deer all over, and I'm like, it's nice for the wildlife, but my lawn looks like shit. But yeah, I actually got stuck in the lawn yesterday. Trying to get it all done, but it's not going to happen. So,
yeah, that seems to be the flavor of the month this year so far,
I guess. Well, let's switch gears a little bit here, and let's get into this public land subject. And for starters, I guess, how long have you been hunting public land, and why are you hunting public land? Like, how did you get into it?
So I've been hunting public land for almost as long as I've been hunting. When I very first started hunting and when I got my first bow, I was hunting on my parents' 10 acres, just a small little, like all wooded 10 acres. My dad never did any food plots. Of course, back then that was, not really on the horizon for the majority of people like it is nowadays. They're not such a hot topic. But I started bow hunting when I was 12. And 13 is when I really got exposed to the public land scene. That's when I started going out and sitting with my dad for rifle season. And we have a family deer camp that's up in Alpena, Michigan, or just south of Alpena, between Alpena and Osneek. And it's been in the family for years. The camp sits on 80. Only a couple of the guys hunt on the 80, and then everybody else that's up there, we all kind of pile off and go into our selective state land areas, or there's a couple guys that got private land parcels up close to there. So that's really where I got exposed to it. And I think that originally when I went in there, it was my understanding that, when my dad goes up to deer camp, there's, maybe a 50-50 chance he's going to get a deer. Maybe he's not going to get a deer. Maybe it's a buck. Maybe it's not a buck. And, you don't have a great number of opportunities. And that was what my perception of state land deer hunting was. So the very first year that I was hunting up there when I was 14, I remember my dad passed up on some small bucks and some does, and because he knew I was coming up to hunt with him. And I remember going up there, I think it was, 6 days or 7 days after opening day. And my first sit in the morning, there was a group of about 5 doe that came in through a few shooting lanes. And I took a shot at one, and I was so excited, I shot right over the top of the doe's back. And I remember going up there, and we looked for blood, and we looked for hair, and we didn't see anything. And he was trying to explain to me, that stuff happens when you get excited. You just got to be sure to, slow your breathing down and squeeze your trigger and not jerk and pull and, follow through with the shot. Don't try and peer around the scope. And I was just devastated. My cousin shot his first deer at doe the night before, and me and him are like brothers. So he did it. Why can't I do it? I screwed up, and
do it.
I had to do it exactly. And in my mind, like I've heard of, my dad's had experiences where, you might get one shot at a nice deer on the state land, and that's it. Well, I was all bummed out, and I kind of was like, nah, I don't even know if I want to hunt. I don't know if I want to go out. We're not probably going to see anything because I already shot and scared away all the deer. Of course, I was super naive, super young at the time. And my dad just kept pushing me. He says, nope, we gotta go out. We gotta go sit. And he says there's plenty of time left. And I think 2 days later, we were out there, and we got in there really late in the afternoon. And we were only sitting for maybe 10 minutes. And down one of his main shoot lanes that he's got out there on one of the trails he walks in, I just happened to look down there, and I saw a rack come out of the woods, come right into the trail. And I threw the gun up, and the buck looked kind of over in our direction. Then he went back to sniff on the ground, and I put it on him and shot and dropped him right there in his tracks. My dad didn't even know what the heck was going on. He was still getting stuff situated inside the brush pile. And he's like, geez, Pete, what's going on? And I told him I shot a buck. And he's like, no way. And he looked up, and he says, oh, man, he's right there on the ground. So we went up, and it was a little basket rack, 1.5-year-old 6-point. But, it could have been, it might as well have been as big as some of the bucks I got hanging on the wall. I'll still remember that one till, day I die.
Right.
So that was that first deer experience. And then from that point on, everything just kind of grew. Our family up there is, like I said, it's always been a family deer camp, always will be a family deer camp. There's about 13 or 14 active members right now. And we got a 16 bunkhouse camp with bunk beds all in the back, and then kitchen, dining, living area in the front. An old buck pole out back, a cook shed, you name it, just like the classic deer camp that you think about from northern Michigan. So
would
cool.
you say that the exposure at a young age and kind of the challenge of your dad instilling in you, like, you might get an opportunity but you might not, and then you getting an opportunity, do you think that's like the reason why you like it so much? Or was it the only thing? I mean, you said you hunted 10 acres, but public land and having 80 acres up there, that's really big. So was
Right.
that like, this is a lot bigger, this might be more opportunity than a 10 acres, so that's why you did it?
I think it was a combination of everything. I think the cool thing about that particular area of state land that we hunt is my dad tells stories how it used to be so heavily hunted, back 30, 40, 50 years ago. And he said opening day, getting in there, he says, whether it be nasty, it'd be a ton of snow, he says, you'd be towing vehicles out just to get back into where we would go hunt. And he tells stories from when him and my great uncle would go back. I mean, it's a 25-minute drive from our camp back to this chunk of state land. And it's probably only, as the crow flies, about 1.5 miles from the back porch off our camp straight through the woods. But it is a nasty little place to get back into. And once we're there, where we actually end up going to walk to our stands is probably anywhere. The closest stands are about 3/4 mile up to, I go all the way back in about 1 mile or just a touch over. And I think that is the biggest draw for me, why I like state land, is because still to this day, you go out there for rifle season, I don't see anybody besides when I walk out to meet my dad at the trailhead. But also, just as much as it's the unknown and you never know what you might see because it is such a large chunk of property, it was tradition. This was something that our family has done. Everybody up there that's my extended family and lives up around the area, they all have, parcels around their house or private that they could access or something like that. But this is how it's been tradition from, my great grandparents that, built the hunting cabin, and we've kind of just kept it that way. And, we all go up there knowing that I could probably go sit somewhere November 15th and have a lot better opportunity to shoot a giant buck, but it becomes, a lot more tradition and a lot more just family time, camaraderie. And then, when you shoot a deer, if you get an opportunity to shoot a nice buck, it's a real big bonus. And sharing that experience with all those guys up there is, something I will, I'll never give up.
Right. And you were talking about when, back when you were 12, 13, 14. And I kind of go back to when I was that age as well. And, I didn't have cameras back then. We never used trail cams. We just I went out and hunted one stand. There was no such thing as like moving a stand and run and gun. And, and that's what you did. And then you bring up the fact of the unknown. So, now I feel like that's what state land would be to me, because not that I wouldn't go put up trail cams, but it's like the unknown. You have no idea what's in there. You don't know if anybody's been hunting in there or, even what deer are around. So I could definitely see why that would be intriguing. And Justin, I mean, I think that's what intrigues you as well, right? I mean, you don't know what's out there either half the time.
No, I don't. I just want to back up for 1 second, because you guys are, you're talking about being 12 and 13 and, hunting deer. In New York, we weren't allowed to hunt deer legally until we were 16. So when I was 11, I was just taking my hunter safety course just so I could walk around with a shotgun hunting squirrels and pheasants. I still had to wait till I was 16 to even consider hunting a deer. So I was going with my dad, just tagging along, doing more harm than good, probably 90% of the time. But just a little difference in the storyline. But you're right. Like I don't run cameras. I don't know what's there. I like the idea of the unknown. And Aaron, you and I have talked about this couple times where, my opinion is, the land will tell you what the deer are going to do. Like, the landscape will tell you how to hunt that particular place. And if you know a whitetail, you know where to look and what to look for in order to, to have those encounters. Like you said,
Right.
You used to sit one stand, and it was, old trusty out there, your lucky spot or whatever. And it was just, you see something, you see it. If you don't, you don't, But I think we could probably all agree, like, as we've evolved as deer hunters, and I think it's kind of been what brought this evolution of, like you said, the run and gun and, the spot and stalk, like, tactics. And you started to realize, like, you sit in that stand, you get bored, like, I'm going to go walk around. And then you start seeing more of the woods, and you start, you spook deer off, and it's like you go see where they were. Okay, well, why were they there? Like, why didn't they go past my stand? Why are they 200 yards over here? Like, and like those are the things you just kind of you put in the bank and chalk up as experience, as lessons learned. And then next time you go out, you say, I'm gonna go sit on the ground. I'm gonna go over where that deer was last time, and then you see a whole different world. You're not looking at the same 100 yards that you have, before. And it's like the evolutionary aspect of, like, learning how to hunt to me. It's not, you're not doing that one thing that has always been done. Like, you can still do it in the same place, like you're talking about, like at the camp, but, like, there's more to be had, but you still walk by that old 2x4 ladder up to a pallet, screwed to a tree, and you're like, that's where it all started. Right there is what got me into this.
I mean, that's exactly it, Justin. I mean, you're 100% right. I mean, I look at when I started hunting, like when I was hunting with my dad to when I was on my first couple sits by myself, and my dad had, like I kind of alluded to this earlier, he's always been a hunter as long as I can remember. But he's been perfectly content being a, I don't want to call it a rifle warrior hunter, but, he loves the family aspect of it, loves, he of course he loves to shoot deer. Of course he loves to be out in the woods, but, he's never been I'm going to just bust my butt and go 10,000 extra miles to try and make sure that I can shoot the biggest deer possible. So, some of those things that I grew up with and some of those things that I learned how to hunt were from him, but a lot of it has been what you described as that exploratory and kind of walking around and self-teaching where the deer are at, why they're there. Maybe I'll go sit over here, maybe I'll try this. And I think that aspect of the curiosity and the unknown of the state land and being able to explore like so many different topographies is what the education that I've developed thus far has led me to. So
in those times when I would just go with my dad for the sake of being there, I didn't know why he was picking just places to sit that he did. I mean, and he hunted state land in New York, and it was, I think part of it for me was that allure of, well, this is what Dad did, or this is what Dad does, like this is how I want to do it, or this is what I'm going to do.
Right.
And you just find yourself going back to the exact same parking lot and walking the same path, and it's like there's no stand in there, but that's the blowdown we sat in the first time I went, and this is where that doe walked 5 yards away and blew at us. And I bet you I was 6-7 years old at this time. He bought me like one of the first like real tree camo onesie, like you step in, zip it up, it's not like a onesie, but you know what I'm saying?
Right. Like
not a baby onesie.
I still remember the day that the UPS truck pulled in my driveway and dropped that box off, and my dad said, "Your camo's here." And I'm like, "You got me a camel?" Like, I thought he was talking about an animal. Like, he goes, "No, your camo." I'm like, oh yeah, to hunt. We're going hunting. It's like, yeah. He's like, I got you some camo. So, just one of those funny stories. It's that first experience, that one thing you remember that was like, it's finally mine. Like I get to do it. It's real.
Yeah, that's the cool, authentic part about it. And I grew up the same way, but was fortunate enough that we had a big piece of private, like my dad and one of his best friends, and still to this day, and still part of deer camp. We still hunt that ground. They started hunting it back in the late 70s, and it was just those two. And now it's evolved to a couple of my uncles and some of their friends, and now us boys that hunt it. And it's still cool to every time I drive into that parking, or that, not the parking lot, but to the trail, I think about different stories and different memories, like this is where the buck fell out of the back of Jack's truck when we were driving out that morning after he shot it. He had his tailgate down, it fell out. And I remembered that, remember stuff like that. And I think to elaborate on both your guys' points is, Matt, you were talking about, your dad just didn't really go the extra mile to kill the biggest buck. But, back when our dads were hunting, they were hunting to put food on the table because that's, what they needed to do. Now, I mean, we do it to put food on the table, don't get me wrong, but we're not relying, maybe you guys are, we love venison, don't get me wrong, but we're not relying on the next deer that I have to get to get us through the next half of the year, but
Right.
It's a little bit different times. And I think that's why the evolve of now we're looking for another challenge, because we could go out and kill a deer just about every time out, probably, regardless, if it didn't matter what you wanted to go after. Age structure, score, if you just want to go kill a deer, you could go kill one. And I think that's why everything's evolved, is because, all of us are looking for another challenge. And it's like you said, Justin, why is that deer coming out over there? Why are they taking that pattern to go feed in that big field? Well, I don't know. Let's go over and check it out. Well, maybe this is where I should put my stand. And I think that baby steps like that, I think that's how it started evolving everything. And here we are today. Guys are buying $500 stands that are 8 pounds to put on their back and try to sit in every tree every day. It's like, which is not a bad thing. I want to start doing that a little bit more, because your opportunity could be a lot higher, or you're seeing different trees and different topography. When I sat in the same tree probably for the first 5-6 years of my hunting, career, I guess you could say, you're looking at the same trees. You're like, oh, that tree turns green here in about 3 days, and then it's going to be orange, and then these birds come in at this time. And it's like, go see something different, and it spruces it up a little bit. And I think the allure for public land to me is like, I've never set foot on that piece of property. It's like learning something new. It's a new thing, and it's fun, and I think that's kind of where it's at for me.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's funny you talk about walking in and seeing the 2x4 ladder with the pallet and stuff, and I can tell you with 100% honesty that I still have the same seat that I spruce up every single year on the state land, and I've had it since I was 14. And
wow.
I still sit it every opening day that I'm up there, or every first sit, regardless, just because it's tradition. Like, this is just, and the spot is, it's not just like I'm just going to walk off the 2-track and sit right here spot. It's a spot that's between two good bedding areas right on the edge of a dried up lake bed and some cedar swamp. So it's a really good travel corridor. The only thing that makes that spot good versus makes that spot crappy is the water level. If the water level is super high and the water or the air temperature gets kind of cold, or we get that crusty ice but not good enough to walk on, those deer move out. But any other time, as long as you don't have those conditions, it could be just a regular season, or I've had it up there where I've encountered the biggest buck I've ever seen in my entire life at 30 yards. And, you just never know.
Right. That's the thing. You just don't know what's going to step out.
Right.
And that's
exactly.
Michigan gets a bad rap for not having big deer, people say, but I think a lot of that gets masked by how many hunters we have. So people say there's a lot of hunters there, so there's no big deer. Well, there is. I mean, they're not behind every tree, but I mean, look at Michigan buck poll on social media every year, or go look at Michigan Outdoors when they do their big buck nights. I mean, there's guys out there killing 160, 170, 180 inch, 200 inch deer year in, not the same guy, but like year in and year out, these deer are getting taken out of public land, private land. And yeah, I mean, southern Michigan is known a little bit better than any part of the Michigan, the rest of the Michigan, but it's moving up. I mean, up here by me in Isabella County, Mecosta County is a really good county. Isabella County is starting to be a really good county, and Midland County, and it's starting to move up. Clare County has always been a good one. So it's like, yes, we do have a lot of hunters, and are you going to go out and kill a 140-inch deer every year? Probably not, but they are here though, and I don't know. I think it just gets a bad rap for the amount of hunters that are here, and people just jump to conclusions saying, well, there's probably no big deer here then. So,
yeah, I've never. Aaron, you and I hunted turkeys once for half a day. Oh, you weren't even there. I don't think I was with you.
Up here?
I don't. Yeah. I'm sorry if I'm wrong about this, but
I was here. I was here, but I was not with you that morning.
Right. Okay. That's what I thought. But so I've never hunted deer up there. I've just hunted turkeys. But from what I gather, like just seeing like the things you're talking about, like the Michigan buck pole, and like hearing the stories, and hearing like Ranella talk about Michigan, and hearing you talk about Michigan deer hunting, and it sounds a lot like deer hunting in northern New York, like up in the Adirondack Mountains, like Lake Placid, Saranac Lake area up in there. You're mountain hunting, and you're back in this, you're in deep, old growth hardwood forest, and you're changing elevations. You're trying to find the right tree species as the elevation change based on the amount of snow, north side, south side, where the wind's coming from, and they literally just track deer. You find a good track, and then, you just follow it. You wait for a good snowstorm, you go find a track crossing the road, and you just start walking. And like you're saying, they are by no means around every corner, but the guys that know how to identify, number one, a buck track to begin with, but number two, like a mature buck track, it's the guys that know what the hell they're doing. They're dragging 150s and 160s off the mountain, pretty consistently. And, it has that same camp feel, because a lot of those guys that are doing that have been grandfathered into these camps that were established when paper mills were running big up there. So like all this paper company land has been handed down to the generations where siblings and grandkids, and it's been staying in the family. Like nobody ever, like very seldomly sells that off, because it was almost a gift, and it was a gift.
Right.
It's that opening day we're hunting the river, we're going up to, St. Lawrence County, we're gonna, it's the same people, aunts, uncles, nephews, dads and sons, and it's, I know exactly what you're talking about, because I've seen it just, firsthand in New York.
Right.
But, it's just those big old, like, those bucks that those guys pull out of there some years are like 8 to 10 years old. There's so little pressure up there, and there's just so much place for them to go. I mean, just those big swampy chocolate antler, like a Saskatchewan deer, really.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And they're pushing 250 pounds, 300 pounds, and it's very unlike anything else that I could think of except for Michigan.
Well, and also, Matt, and you could probably vouch for this, or it might be a little different for you as well, but within the last 5 or 6 years, and it could be because I'm evolving as a hunter a little more too, and kind of getting out of my shell and thinking outside the box a little bit more, because before it was always you're looking for that big buck potion, that mathematical equation. What is it? It's beans plus edge plus thick is you're going to kill a big buck, which in some instances that's true. But the last 5 or 6 years, I've kind of went out of my shell, and I've seen more Pope and Young deer in daylight hours on stand in Michigan than I've ever seen in my life. And last year I saw was probably the most I've seen in 1 year, different Pope and Young bucks. And the more and more I do something a little different, where it's like, man, I probably shouldn't do that. But then I go out there and I see one of the bigger deer I've ever seen ever in Michigan, and it's like, well, I just learned something. What did I do right here? What did I do wrong? Maybe I was doing something wrong my whole life, and it's, I don't know. There's more and more Pope and Young deer, I think, evolving and getting to a higher age class, say 3 or 4 years old, and they're starting to get a little more visible. And honestly, I'm starting to believe that deer here in Michigan, around me anyway, are really nomadic. Like, it's really hard to pattern a higher age class deer in general, but in Michigan it's near impossible. So it's like, I watch these TV shows and I'm like, I want to be like Lee Lukoski. I want to pattern this deer and kill him at 5:30 on Wednesday night. It's like, I don't know if that's really going to happen, but you just kind of got to adapt and roll with it. But I guess my point is within the last 5 or 6 years, I've seen a lot better deer, and I think it's starting to show that, year in and year out, you just evolve. And I think Michigan is coming around as, there is more deer, better deer in, more numbers, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I would say that, there's probably a few factors that would attribute to that, because I would probably agree the last 6 years, 7 years that I've been hunting have been some of the best years that I have, and I've taken some of my nicest bucks with that. And I think a combination, the only downfall and sadness to all that is Michigan hunters, they're on the decline. There's not as many as what there once was at its peak.
Right.
So you're losing some hunters, so you're obviously losing some, deer harvest numbers that year. So it allows those bucks to get older. More people are appreciating the fact of, trying to take a mature deer. I'll be the first person to say, if a deer makes you happy, you shoot that deer, and I'm never going to argue with it one way or the other.
Right.
But if you're choosing to go after a mature animal, then, more power to you. Get ready and buckle up, because it's going to be, definitely a challenge that you haven't experienced yet. And I think more people are trying to experiment at least with that, if not, fully commit to that. And then you have that other factor of people that are doing that and choosing to go look at those deer. Well, then all of a sudden, they kill a 100-inch deer, and they've never done that before. And all of a sudden the challenge becomes, I can, I know I can do that. Let me try and push 115. Let me push 130, 150.
Yep.
And then the more people that do that, even if it's a select few, it's like a ripple effect,
It really is. I remember back when I felt like it was so hard to try to kill a 100-inch deer and like try to see one. They were like unicorns. And I would get so upset year in and year out, like, man, what am I doing wrong? Like, in 1 year, it was 2008. It was 1 year, it just like things started clicking and falling into place. And I went on like a 3-year stretch or something like that where I killed deer that were over 100 inches, and I was like, okay, now it's like starting to feel a little easier. And then it like, you get back to reality and it humbles you, and it's like, okay, I didn't see one this year, Yep. But, and then you go on a run. Like, I've been on a run since 2015 till now. Like, every year I've killed a Pope and Young deer or better. And it's just one of those things that, I don't know, it just comes and goes, I guess. But I just remember when it was so hard to do that. It felt like it was, and I think it was, like you said, Matt, maybe you're so naive to what's going on and not learning, and just kind of relying on certain things. Maybe you're hunting over bait, which I was, and you're hunting one stand, which sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But I remember you walking in the same trail every time, and you walk out the same trail every time,
Yep.
So those deer were watching you all the time. So once that started
guaranteed.
clicking, it things started happening. So
Yep.
I don't know, adapt and overcome, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's really yours to make of it what you want. I mean, if you're perfectly content doing what you're doing, awesome. But, you can pretty much do anything you want to do. You just gotta sit down, think about a game plan, and then try and figure it out. But
Right.
the only person that's going to hold you back is, if you're worried about, I don't know if I'm going to be successful. Well, who cares? I've had plenty of unsuccessful seasons because I took gambles or I didn't gamble enough, and those are all learning experiences that make you better.
Yeah. And Justin and I just talked about this on a recent podcast about success and how, what is success to you. And to your point, if you're out there saying I wasn't successful this year because I didn't kill anything, well, maybe you're reaching or looking for a different success. Maybe success comes in smaller packages. Maybe it's success is just trying to lay eyes on a mature deer, and that's a success. And then the next year's success is trying to hone in on that deer and ultimately kill him, and be able to take home the meat and eat it and provide for your family and stuff like that. So that's kind of how I broke it down too. Like, what's success really mean to you? Do I need a buck every year? I would love to kill a buck every year, but I'm not mad if I don't. I'm out there challenging myself and I enjoy it. So I don't want to put like this thing on a pedestal where it's like if I don't achieve it, then it's like a failure. I don't know if that's a good or bad way to look at it, but I just try to look at success a little different. And maybe it's because I'm getting a little more mature in my life and trying to figure things out and just, I don't know. It's more fun for me, and the challenge is still there. And I don't know. Things have just started clicking over the last couple of years, and things are working. So I'm just gonna keep rowing the boat that way.
Yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I want to rewind here a second. I want to rewind, and something we said is hunting the same stand like the way we used to do it, and the benefit that we've all learned by letting our curiosity get the better of us. But Matt, you've killed 2 deer out of the same stand consecutively. Like, you went back to the same stand to look at the same to see the same view. I guess metaphorically and physically, since you ended up killing again. But I got to know the story on that. Like, what was it a stand you put in because it was that good, or was it just someplace that produced for you, like Old Faithful?
So this was the first buck I took off this piece of state land. This public land spot was, when I drive my truck and I leave my driveway, it's probably 1.5 miles as the crow flies, maybe a little bit less.
Okay, so this is the spot you were talking about earlier? Yep,
this is the spot I was talking about earlier. And the first year I actually found this spot was the first year we moved into our house in like around Thanksgiving. So it was the following September I found this spot, and it was opener a grouse or woodcock, one of the two. And I was out hunting with my dogs with one of my dad's neighbors who has a dog kennel, and I bought my first hunting dog from him. And so we're out there hunting, and he always teases me because I go out there for the hunting for the dogs, but I'm always on a 2-part mission. Yeah, I want to kill birds, but I'm also looking at new ground, Not that necessarily I'm going to hunt at that time if I blow it up, but just for inventory purposes. And I happened to walk by a little inland marsh, and I really didn't give it too much like looking over besides just a quick 5-10 minutes scooting around there while my dog was busting up some brush. And I just saw a few good rubs, and I saw it had a couple little creeks, and I pulled it up when I got back to my truck on one of the Scout Look or Hunt Stand or one of those two, and just was looking at the area, and I said, that looks like I should go back in and take a better look. So the next weekend, I think it was 2 weeks before opener of the bow season, I went back in there and just did a little walking, nothing truly invasive. And the biggest thing that stood out to me was I just happened to walk into an area where it was like 3 or 4 funnels that hit this, what I've heard guys say call like a vortex. And I was like, I should probably come in here with my climber. And to truth be told, and honest to God truth, the spot is not difficult to get to. And it is not far from where, like off the 2-track. But I think that's also part of the beauty of the spot, is most people don't think about it.
So it's more of an overlooked spot where guys are just walking by it? Oh,
geez, Pete, I know there's people that I've been sitting in my stand when I've seen people drive their truck down the 2-track 180 or 200 yards away.
Wow.
Multiple times.
So I'm sorry. I'm just back up real quick.
No, go ahead.
When you mean inland marsh, can you paint a little better picture of what that looks like?
Yeah, so what I found was it's about the spot that I set up on is about 80 yards across by maybe 130 yards long. And it's got these things that I had to actually ask when I shot my first buck what the heck these were. And they're called tussocks, I think is what the proper term. And it's just these raised mounds, and then they have just, really tall grass all over it. But it's literally like a million shovelfuls of dirt.
Yes.
All these mounds, and then it's a pain to walk through first and foremost. But that's all the bottom layer of undergrowth is, with some straggler willows and alders and whatever else around the edges and some cats. And that's where I essentially set up on. And then I'm sitting between two little creeks that hook up with another creek, form like a main branch of one of our local streams. And then that funnels to the south and goes into a very, I would say, large marsh, probably 1.5 miles by 1.5 miles, big one.
Okay.
So I am on a little pocket off of that, but knowing how big and how nasty and thick that is, like, you wouldn't even want to walk in there unless you were just, really bored.
Right.
I figured that this has got to be an area where, probably some big deer go in there in bed. And, they're going to come out of there, or they're going to go back in there, one of the two. And I remember I was sitting watching the Lions losing to the Chicago Bears, pissed off.
Go figure.
And yeah, exactly. And I just was sitting there, and I told my wife, I was like, I'm going to go hunt. This is stupid. If I'm going to go sit in the woods, at least I'm going to enjoy, the view and the scenery. So I left later than I wanted to. And I was like, I should go try that state land spot. So I did. I threw my climber in, drove in there, went in there. I kind of had a tree picked out.
Now, is this in October?
This is October the 18th. First time I sat the spot. No rhyme or reason other than I wanted to just go sit there. I did have a good wind for it. That was about the only thing that I knew was in my favor. I knew the time of the.
What was like the temperature?
Temperature, I would
was
say
it like a cold front?
Nope. There was, like I said, that was about the wind was about the only thing that was in my favor. Is I have to hunt that particular spot either with no wind or some component of a west wind. Otherwise, the spot doesn't work good because I'm sitting on the east side of that marsh.
Okay.
And, no, I don't recall there was nothing significant with the moon phase. There definitely wasn't a cold front that came through because I remember I was in my pretty light gear at that time. And I walked in there as quiet as I could, got up the tree with my old man climber as quiet as I could, kicked back, took a look at my watch, and I think it was like right around like 4:45 or something like that. I was like, well, I got about 3 hours or so good light, and I was sitting there, and I kind of kicked my feet up on my rest, sat there a little bit, and all of a sudden, and it was a little longer than all of a sudden, probably 30-40 minutes, I just heard this brush breaking off to my left. So I quick got my feet down and grabbed my bow, and I could just make out a silhouette of a deer coming out of the same pocket of the side of the marsh that I was, and he came out and was going kind of dead away from me. But I didn't hear him until he was right next to me, and I was like, that's weird. I should have heard that deer if it was coming to me and then caught my wind or, something screwy happened. And he got out there, and I could see it was a big-bodied deer. Couldn't make out his horns yet. Well, he turned and started going north along that creek, going to be coming right in front of me. And I was like, oh, it's going to get serious here. So I took my rangefinder out and was ranging the opening I had to shoot out on the marsh, and the edge of it was like 22 yards. And when he finally hit a little bit of a clear spot where I could see where he was, I knew right away. I was like, oh boy, that's a big deer. Super high rack, tall tined 8-pointer, big body. And he just was moseying right along, not a care in the world. Didn't stop for nothing, just kind of walking along. He gets up to this tag alder, and I think he's going to take about, 5 or 6 more steps. and he's going to be in the open at 22 yards, and I'm getting ready to draw back and put my 20-yard pin on him. And he stops, and he rakes this tag all in a little bit, and then he turns, and he comes quartering right to me, crosses the creek, and, I mean, he's coming in right underneath my frickin' tree at this point, and I'm like, geez, oh, Pete. And I didn't do anything yet because I didn't know what the heck he was going to do. Well, he gets up close, and I realize he's either got to turn left or turn right, and he's going to be broadside no matter what he does. So as soon as he gets ready to turn around this little popple tree in front of me, as soon as he does that, he ends up turning to the north, and I draw. And I had to shoot him from like a half-crouch position so I could sneak the arrow through these branches. And I probably shot him at 10 yards maybe.
Wow.
And he wheeled around, and I knew I just lit him up right away because as soon as he turned, the arrow was hanging by the fletchings out the other side. And then when he turned, it was like somebody took a 5-gallon bucket of blood and just threw it. So I knew I just double lunged him, and he took off straight dead away across that marsh. And he couldn't get his front legs going to save his soul. Man, he was plowing through the ground, and I was freaking out, trying not to fall out of the stand. And I was like, I'm going to see this deer go. Like, I'm going to see him just go down. But I'll be goddamn, he cleared that frickin' marsh all the way across. He hit one of the bigger feeder creeks and turned and went running off that creek. And I could still hear him running and splashing. And I'm like, there's no way. There's no way that deer is going that far.
Right.
And eventually I don't hear him anymore. I didn't hear any big splash or crash, but I started like second guessing myself. And then I was looking back to where I saw the blood, and I could follow the blood trail from the tree stand all the way across the marsh, like visible. And I'm like, oh, he's dead. So I packed up my stuff, called my dad. I said, I know you've never been out to this spot, but go over to your neighbor and grab him. He knows where I'm at. And I said, meet me out here. And I got down and I went and looked and walked up on this big buck. And he ended up dressing at 183 pounds. I think he was. Wow. That one. And dragging him back, he probably went 125 or 150 yards on that double lung.
Yep.
And I'm like, whew. I mean, it was impressive just to see how far he got. But the crappiest thing was dragging him back across that marsh and that tussocks. Oh, gosh. I couldn't just drag him. I had to turn around and grab him by two hands with the horns, pull him over one tussock, reposition my feet. So I was dragging him about 6 inches to a foot at a time. Wow. All the way across.
Oh, my gosh.
And I finally got
I know
back.
Exactly what you're talking about, too.
Dude, it's brutal.
I
remember I finally got him back underneath the tree just as my dad and his neighbor were getting over there, and I whistled to him, and then we got him out of the woods, and we were all hooting and hollering and high-fiving and whatnot, and it was a good day.
So was that your first sit on public ground, like around your house? I mean, you've hunted public ground up in the northern Michigan. Was that the first set over there?
That was the first sit on that particular piece of public ground, and I think probably the first sit of public ground that I did since I moved into this house.
Okay.
Yep. You're right.
So, I mean, you get him down.
Yeah.
Go ahead. No, you keep going.
I was going to say, I kind of think I know where you're going. And you get him down, you get him killed, and you realize what you did, and you're like, oh, boy. Well, then the wheels start turning more and more as the season goes on. And
yep.
Like, well, I got to go in and, look at this place a little more. And I didn't hunt that spot more than one more time that year because I didn't want to get, as it got closer to, pre-rut and rut and rifle season, I didn't want people to know necessarily where I was because I knew there was tracks in there and whatnot. So a long year goes by. I did put 2 cameras out there the next summer, and I put them further deeper in where this buck had, where he probably was going to be going to. And I'll tell you, this hits on exactly the point earlier. You never know what's out there. I put cameras out there. The only pictures I had for a month and a half were does and fawns. It was the most disappointing pull of a camera card I've ever had. And I was like, there's no way that this is just a doe and a fawn spot and that there was just this one random buck that was, maybe bedded up the creek or wherever it was. So I decided that this next hunting season that I was going to go back out there, but I was only going to hunt it when the wind was right. I was only going to potentially go out there early season or right when like pre-rut starts to happen, and bucks might start cruising a little bit more looking for does. And it was the first, I think, full weekend of season. I think it was October 8th. I'm sorry. And I went in there and I sat that spot because it had a good wind. I sat it Friday morning because I took the day off and didn't see a deer. I sat it there Friday night. I saw 2 does. Sat it.
So just a second. So what are you thinking?
Yeah,
I mean, there's head games going on right now because
Oh,
all
it
you've
is.
had on pictures were does and fawns, and then you go in
Mhm.
there and get skunked the first morning, and then you go in there and
Yep.
see does and fawns. So where's your head at right now?
My head is. I honestly thought that there was some stupid freaking buck that happened to walk too far away from his core area, or he got pushed out by a bigger one, and he just said, "Well, I'm going to sleep here for the afternoon, and then I'll get where I'm going to go later on." And I thought I was being duped. I'm like, "What are you doing here? Like, this is not productive like you thought it was going to be." Like,
And this is where hunters they sit there where we like overthink things and we're like, okay, this spot's burnout. There's no more. We leave, and then the biggest deer ever walks by and you don't know it. So
Well, and that's what it was. And I still went through that Saturday morning. I went and sat there. Same freaking thing. I think I saw one small buck that day in a doe, like a spike horn or something. And I remember we went up to just north of me. There's a little it's called Lewis Farms, and it's like a petting zoo, an apple orchard, and whatnot. And I went up there with my wife just to spend the day with her, get some apples and drink some cider and whatnot. And I remember we're supposed to go be up there on a date, and I am just complaining about this amount of time I've wasted knowing I could be back at the house shooting a doe. And I am just like, what should I do, sweetie? Should I go hunt this spot one more time, or should I sit at the house? And she says, well, you should shoot a doe, put some meat in the freezer, and then get that monkey off your back. And I'm like, yeah. And then I start looking at the weather more, and I see the wind's going to die down to just about nothing, and it's going to get cool that night. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go sit there one more time. So I do. I sneak back out there. It's pretty windy when I first get there, strong wind right in my face. But probably the last hour of daylight, it dies down to almost nothing. And I'm sitting there, and I haven't seen a deer yet. And I'm really like, dang it. Not only am I getting skunked, but my wife was right. I should have went and hunted the house. And then I just happened to look out across the marsh, and on the far opposite side, I see this tree just getting bent over back and forth. And I'm like, oh, shit. So I kind of get ready and get my binos up and look, and I see this buck step out. Big, tall, white rack. No brow tines. It was a big mainframe 6, 3.5 is what I probably put him at. And I think it was the same deer I had pictures of at my house the year before. He was also a mainframe 6, no brows at 2.5. Again, that's just all speculation, but we're not too far away from where that place is. So I'd like to think it is. And I'm like, oh man, this is a cool deer. He's definitely mature. And he starts coming right across the marsh, heading right to my opening. And I'm like, here we go. And he gets halfway across the marsh, and almost literally in the same spot that one came out that I shot the year before, probably 30, 40 yards to my left, I hear some brush breaking. And if anybody who's heard a buck coming through the woods versus a doe, you can almost instantly tell if they're making a bunch of noise and deliberately they don't give a crap. Like, that's just how they move. And out steps this shorter tine but super wide, heavy rack 8-pointer. And I'm just like, what in the hell is going on? And that 6-pointer stops at like 60 yards and watching him. And this wide rack, I'm pretty sure that this 8-pointer was an older deer, older than what that 6 was. And this is October 9th, so first week of season basically, and that 8-pointer stepped out and cocked his head sideways and swelled all up like it was November the 2nd. It was unbelievable. In the meanwhile, I'm sitting here like, this is the coolest experience I've had up in, that I've been alive, bow hunting or hunting in general. And I'm not going to get to kill either one of these deer because they're so screwing around with each other. I'm not going to, nothing's good going to
Right.
happen to this. And that 8-pointer goes up and does a big half circle until he's right, probably even with that 6-pointer's hindquarters. And he takes one charge and lunges in. And that 6 takes a big loop up and gets on the other side of the shooting lane. He comes in closer. He's only about 35, maybe 40 yards, but he's beyond my lane where I can shoot. And that 6-pointer continues to go to the northeast, which would be kind of going broadside, but he's getting into too much stuff where I can't shoot. Meanwhile, that 8 is still standing out in the marsh, and he's on the opposite side of my shooting lane, but he starts coming to step into it like he's going to run that 6-pointer off. And he's coming perfectly broadside. So I quick range where he's going to go. I range this little pine tree out there, and it was 40 yards. And he went out there. He stopped perfectly in the opening, but his front shoulder was right on that little scraggly pine. And he doesn't, all he's staring is at that 6-pointer, and he's just watching him. Like, he's not on edge. He's not nervous. He's just like, get the heck out of my area. And I'm at full draw, debating on if I take a chance. And something told me, don't, that's an old deer. Those deer are around. You might have an opportunity later. You don't want to make a bad shot. All those things going through my mind. So I stay at full draw. He walks off. And at this point, I choose not to try and stop him. And I just let him walk through my lane, or the little bit of the lane that he had left. And I let down my bow, and I watched him, and that 8-pointer kind of pushed that 6 off to the north. And I remember it was the latest I've ever sat in a tree stand. I sat there till probably a good hour and a half after dark.
Wow.
And tried to sneak out of there as best I could. I left my climber right on the tree. And I went back, and I remember I was so jacked up talking to my wife, and I was like, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe this. I saw this and this and this. And she's like, but you didn't shoot one? And I'm like, oh,
right.
Okay, this conversation is done. I don't need to explain it to you.
It's the prototypical wife response. You didn't shoot
exactly.
one?
So I remember looking at my phone and seeing that the wind was going to change, and it was actually going to come out of the east tomorrow, which made me concerned, but it was only supposed to be really, really low, but the temperature was going to be like 10 degrees colder than it has been the past few mornings. So I figured my thermals were going to be good even if there was a little bit of wind. So I'm like, screw it. I got to go back there. One of those two is probably going to go back to bed somewhere around there. Maybe I'll get a look at one of them. So I sneak in there really early. I think I sat for close to an hour and a half in the dark. And I'm up there and I'm waiting. And just when the sun's coming up and you're starting to see what's going on, then I'm thinking like, oh, this is going to be the magical time. You can breathe out and you just see it go straight up in the air, and then you made a good decision as far as where it goes. And then the first hour of daylight is just uneventful. There's not a deer, not a fawn, not a doe, nothing. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, they're around here somewhere. They may not be here today. And I no sooner get that thought through my mind, and I look out across the marsh where that 6-pointer came from the night before, but a little bit further in the alders, and I just hear this deer walking. And at this time, I don't know what the deer is, and I'm looking through my binos trying to see. And finally, there's a spot where this deer had to kind of hop over like a deadfall or something like that. And when he hops, I see this big freaking rack clear the top of these alders. And I was like, holy crap. So get ready, get the bow, stand up, watch this bits and pieces of this deer until he gets to an area where I can see him. And as soon as he steps in, I immediately know it's not either deer that I saw the night before. And I guessed him at an 8-pointer when I saw him with my binos, and that's what he was. But he was substantially bigger than both of them. And at this time, like, I'm only focused on killing a deer. Now, after the fact, I'm like, geez, what the heck did I find? I found some freaking honey hole of a honey hole.
Right.
And this deer walks through those alders and stays in the thickest crap, doesn't even come into the marsh. And he goes heading off to the south to that big marsh I was talking to you about earlier. And I let him get out of sight, and I said, man, I just let that deer just walk. And then I thought, well, those 2 bucks were pretty aggressive last night. So, maybe he's the king, or maybe this is his area or whatnot. So I took my grunt tube out and I put it on. I don't know. I had one of those extinguisher deer calls. I don't know if you guys are familiar. Yeah. So I had it like 3/4 of the way down on the mature level, and I did a couple short ones at him, and then I peeled it and curled it back opposite from him and let out a little longer one. And I no sooner let that long third one go, and I heard crash, 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 and he comes flying towards me.
On October 10th?
On October the 9th.
Or 9th?
Unbelievable, the 9th. Yeah, exactly. On October the 9th, this deer comes flying in, crashes, just racing in, hits the edge where it opens up, and is standing there just all staunched and postured, looking around, licking his nose, scent checking, and this time I can get a really good look at him. He's about 45 yards, but no shot. And my heart is about through my chest, like easily the biggest deer I've seen, and I'm just like, geez, this is unreal. First of all, I can't believe I turned this deer. Second of all, like, I get a good look at him, and he's definitely big, saggy belly, a little droop in the back, and he takes like 2 or 3 more steps and stops, licks his nose, scent checks, looks around. And this process goes on every 2 or 3 steps until he ended up making it to my shooting lane. I swear it must have took about 30 minutes. It was the longest 30 minutes of my life. Probably really wasn't. Probably was like 5 or 6. But it was a long freaking time. And I just remember wanting to like draw back, but I'm like, this deer is moving like 2 steps at a time. There's no point. And I'm watching him, and he is almost on the same distance path away from the creek as what that big wide 8-pointer was the night before. So I quick did a couple ranges again, and I knew that pine was at 40 yards. Well, that deer gets up to the last couple trees, and I see he's about ready to move again. So I draw, and as he steps out into the opening, he doesn't step broadside. He starts to curl away and go back to where he was. But he's just this side of that little skinny pine, and the only way I could get a shot was if I leaned out and used the tension on my harness. And I knew it was just inside of 40, and I had my pin set at 30, so I could fluctuate a little bit either way. And when I shot and let that arrow go, I let that arrow go, and he was just doing a slow, easy walk away. He was quartering away, and I remember putting it right in front of his rear hip. And I squeezed that release, and I watched that Luminac go, and I stuck him. And I remember seeing like 2 inches of arrow with the Luminac and the fletching sticking out as he, as he turned and jumped. And he took 2 jumps, and then he stood there in the marsh. And he stood there, and I can't see the side that the arrow was in. He's facing opposite me. And I'm like, crap. Must have hit him back, hit him low. And he stands there for probably at least a minute. And then I start to see him sway. And I'm like, oh, yeah, go down. And he freaking just face planted in the marsh. I about dropped my bow out of my stand. I was hooting and hollering and screaming and, blowing my dad up. And, of course, he's up north. And my one dad's neighbor that helped me drag the other one, he happened to be home. I said, you're not going to believe this, but I said, are you home? He said, yeah. I was like, can you come out to that same place you did last year where you helped me drag that deer? I need some more help. He's like, are you freaking kidding me? He goes, another nice one? I said, bigger. He goes, all right, I'm in my truck. I'll be on my way.
That's awesome.
And, yeah, it was unbelievable.
So what do you think makes that stand so good then? Like, is it just like the hub of everything, or where are these deer coming from? Why are they coming across this marsh? So
the only thing, and since I've killed those 2 deer, that first 8-pointer I killed out of that tree was in 2015, and then it was 2016 I killed that other one. And the only thing that I can figure what's the draw to that particular area is because it is hardwoods on both sides of the marsh, and it's open, And in order for those deer to get to that big marsh or to get up to the north, the best way for them to travel, from what I figure, and the safest way with the most cover, regardless of the time of the year, whether it's early season or whether it's all the foliage is down, is to travel on those creek bottoms and those corridors, because it's the only real thick cover that they got.
I gotcha.
And like I said, I've never went into that big marsh before, but I did explore quite a bit around it, and since then I've mapped out quite a bit more areas. Walked up those other creek bottoms and found some other little hidden pockets that seemed pretty promising. But I did one year, I think it was the year after I killed that buck, I got the nerve to sit what I would call like sitting right in that vortex where those 3 or 4 little creek bottoms funnel into that stream.
Yep.
And this spot is only 60 yards wide, maybe, but it is thick. I mean, I only had 2 spots to shoot, maybe. And I watched this spikhorn chase this doe in and out of that big marsh the whole evening. And I was sitting right on the edge of it. And at the end of the night, it's getting pretty dark, probably maybe 5 minutes left of shooting light, if that. And I was like, well, I'm going to start packing up. And I know sooner I get my release off and I hear this doe come bleating and crashing out of the marsh. And I hear this other deer in behind. And I think, oh, it's just that spikhorn. And she comes flying by my tree. And then on the other side of the stream, that other deer is going. And I'm looking, and I see this just big frickin' buck. Big white, clear as day, you could see the horns. He's about 40 yards on the other side of this stream, crashing and chasing her. He's just on the wrong side. And he would have been every bit as big as the one I shot the year before, if not bigger.
Wow.
And it was, obviously from the 2 that I killed there, that one I've seen. I've sat that spot a few times. I usually sit at least once or twice every year when the weather's right. Even last year when I got that lease. And I've had encounters with, I would say, mature deer 3.5 or older every single year since I started sitting it. And I've killed 2 out of there and then been unsuccessful than the other 2. But it's a very promising spot, and it is pretty consistent as far as at least producing opportunities to see deer. Whether you get a shot at them or not, I just got lucky on those 2 times. But
well, it sounds like it's one of those spots that you're probably not going to see the numbers, but when you do see the deer, it's going to be, the right deer.
Right. And that's kind of what I learned, that the more times I sat it, I still, the most I think I sat it in one season was 7 sits spread out over the course of the rifle season and bow season.
Mm-hmm.
So not a lot. And again, a lot of that was just to keep foot traffic down. I ended up, even though it's not a difficult spot to find, I have 4 different ways to come in off the 2 track. So I don't leave a lot of sign going into it. I don't hang a stand there. I take my climber. I always take it out after a morning hunt unless it's in the evening time, and then I just leave it at the base of the tree only if I know I'm going back in the morning.
Yep.
But,
has anybody caught on to it? Have you found people back in there at all?
There was one person that it was one of the last times I sat, not last year, probably year before, and he had a stand that I found after he got down. I was in there early. It was a good morning, good weather conditions, and I'm sitting there, and I hear this truck coming through, and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. But then I'm like, well, I knew this was going to happen sooner or later. And I watched him drive by, and he drove, I don't know, a couple 100 yards up the 2 track, and I heard his truck shut off. And this is after daylight. And I watch him, and I can see him. I should say not after daylight. He still needed a light to get in, but I could see enough to shoot if I had to.
Right.
And I watch him climb up this tree, and he's got his headlamp on, and I watch him get up into his tree, and he's probably 150 yards to the north of me. And I had full intentions that day. I was going to do some rattling, or I was going to do some, a little bit of aggressive calling. I didn't do anything because he was there. And I remember it was like 8 o'clock when he rolled in there, or 7:45 or something. It was after the time change, or before the time change. And I was texting my buddy all pissed off about this guy sitting like 150 yards from me and yada, yada, yada. And then it was like an hour later and I hear his truck start back up, but he goes back out and leaves. You don't have to be worried about that guy. I mean, if anything, he's just going to keep any deer that I might have got a shot at safe for another year because he's going to turn all those deer nocturnal because of all the stupid stuff he's going to be doing, you know?
Right.
But
Yeah.
I went and found his stand, and he had a double ladder, and he didn't even have the metal pole to brace it against the tree. He found a dead stick with a Y in it, and he had it wedged in there. And I was like, I was like, oh my gosh, you gotta be kidding me! This guy's gonna fall out here and break his neck, and nobody's gonna know where he is. But the next year after that, I haven't seen any stands or any signs of stands or things like that out there. So.
Well, you could give me the coordinates and I'll put them in the show notes if you want.
There's only 4 people, including myself, that know exactly the area that I'm in. One is my dad, one is my dad's neighbor, and then the other one is finally a buddy of mine that I finally showed where that spot is. And that's the one that's on the lease with me, and that's the one that's going out with or to Colorado this fall. All coming with me in September. Nice. So, yeah. So
cool. Well, sweet, man. I mean, you basically defied the odds there. Yeah, hunting one stand year after year and killing some good deer in Michigan on public land.
Yeah, and I mean that 8-pointer the last year I killed at that spot. He dressed at 204 pounds. I didn't weigh him live weight, but I did drag him all the way out with the guts in him. Took him back to the house. And didn't want to leave any blood or any guts because I was quite a bit closer to my tree stand than I was when I killed the one the year before.
Yeah.
And so that's by far the biggest deer I've killed. Not the biggest deer I've seen, but definitely biggest deer I've killed, and probably one I should have sent a tooth in and had him formally aged. But he would have been, if he didn't break off his left brow tine, he would have scored at 100. I estimated right around 131 or 132 inches.
Mm-hmm.
But
great deer.
Not after the. Yeah, he was a great deer. I couldn't be happier.
That's awesome, man. Well, cool. I just love those stories. I mean, and the fact that you're doing it on public land, it just gets my heart going. Like, the reason why I was asking you about that marsh is because I was scouting some public land this winter here around, my neck of the woods, and like, you're painting basically the picture of where a spot that I found in the same kind of marsh, and it's on like a little island of like a hardwood trees, and there's if I go sit some public land this year, I'm going to that stand because I think that's going to be the spot. And honestly, what you described is like the same kind of scenario, so it gets me jacked up.
Yeah, and I can't get away from it. I just got a new. I've always been like a climber state land guy, and then realized like, oh, I really want to get in that tree, but it's not a climber tree. So I broke down and bought an XOP. Assault and some Hawk Helium, their new hang-on, or their sticks with the suction cups, and so I got a little hang and bang set. And even though I got that lease set, I'm super jacked about for this fall. Like I definitely am still, depending on the time of year and what's right with the weather and the wind. Like I'm gonna sneak in, not necessarily in the same tree that I killed those two, but get right down into that little big funnel right on that stream, right on the outskirts of that big marsh. Like on a really big cold front that comes through, or really high pressure, something like that, just to go say I went in there and sat it, and you never know what's going to happen.
Right. That's sweet. So cool. I can't wait to possibly do it this year. And earlier in the podcast I was saying between a lease and private and public, and the thoughts that you and I have to kind of circle back to that question was, and you just kind of brought it up, is I fall in the same boat. You know what I mean? You run cameras on private all year, summer, and you get all these pictures of these bucks that you're like so excited about, and then it's like public that just kind of gets put to the side. Like, how do you kind of juggle that stuff? Like, how do you juggle, I'm going to go to public, or I got private with a couple good deer? Like, how do you juggle in that?
I think a lot of how I'm going to juggle versus private at my house or private on a lease is probably trail cam inventory. I can tell you honestly, I won't run a trail camera on that state land piece because you know what, if I do, maybe I'll get a picture of a really big deer. You know, it's possible. But you know what, that deer might only be through there on a super random period of time. And I could get so focused on hunting one in particular deer that I might miss out on a lot of other opportunities, and I might never see that deer live on the hoof.
Right.
And I think for me, it all comes down into what the inventory is and what the intelligence from the camera is showing me on the public or on the private ground. And then, you know, just if my gut feeling says it's right, go sit the state land, and, you know, don't forget your roots on how you started hunting and, you know, what made you what you are today, then, you know, just go for it. Who cares if it's a bad sit? You're still going to go out there and sit in the woods, and don't be thinking about what might be coming out at your house or up on the lease, because there's a lot of season, and, you know, one or two sits going and taking a gamble like that, not going to make a big difference. And I don't think I'll ever get to the point in my life, no matter if I own more property or whatever the case is, where I won't go sit on public land both during bow season and rifle season, just because it's got that sentimental value, you know?
Yep. Well, and you started there too, you know, when you were young, so it's always got that tradition, like you said, and that's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, most definitely.
Well, cool. I think we wrapped this convo up here. I think it's been a great podcast. It's been one of my favorites, honestly. It's great conversation, and when you were talking about those bucks coming in and rutting basically in early October, I was like, man, I want to be in a stand right now.
But that's exactly right. And it just gets jacked up for the season. I know we got a couple months still to go, but you know, it's going to creep up.
Yep, for sure. I appreciate you coming on again, man, and doing this. It's like I said, this is probably top 3 podcasts that I've done. You're episode number 69, and that was one of my favorites. So
I appreciate that. It's fun, man. I love talking deer and anything with it, and you know, state land hunting. I definitely am no expert at it. I've had some success with it, and I hope to have success continued in the future. And I think it should be, you know, something that, you know, maybe those individuals that only have state land, you know, maybe they might listen to it and say, instead of being discouraged, because I've had definitely more years where I was discouraged hunting state land comparatively to where I was successful by all means.
Yep.
And you keep plugging away, and you keep learning, and you keep finding those new spots, or, you know, educating yourself and becoming more aware of how deer interact and how they move, and, you know, that can turn your whole entire hunting season career around.
For sure. Again, I appreciate you coming on and doing this, and this fall I'm going to have you on again. You're going to be one of the guests I'm going to have return again, just to kind of do like a little report on what's going on in your neck of the woods, and just a little brief call, and just kind of, like I said, do a rut report, or do, you know, what the deer movement is, or even if you've, you know, got one on the ground. So look forward to that, and catching back up with you for sure.
That sounds great, Aaron. Looking forward to it.